Okay, thank you for joining us. This will be this year's RSA Back to School Circulation and Holds refresher. Thank you for joining me online or via recording. I am going to go ahead and turn on my screen share, and mostly I'm just going to kind of walk you through the basic processes in workflows. And if you do have any questions, I will be keeping an eye on my chat, but also feel free to unmute yourself in the meeting and just ask. You won't mess up my flow by asking me any questions. And thank you for everyone who is joining me live this year. So. Okay, if I have done my screen share correctly, you should be seeing my workflows. You'll notice at the top of your workflows screen, you'll have a different selection than I do, but you should have a list of different modules. Everything related to basic circulation is in this Circulation Plus module. On the left of your screen, you have your different groups. Much of what we'll be doing is in the Common Tasks group, but we will be dipping into, users and holds briefly, but you can expand all of these menus just by clicking them. And then to open wizards, just click on the wizard name to open it up. I won't spend a whole lot of time in user registration just because for schools, it is generally not as big a deal. A lot of times we can help you with a batch load of your students and things like that. But if you ever do need to adjust something on a user account, or if you need to create a new user account, all of those functions are down here under users. To create a new user, you just open user registration, enter the user ID you want to assign them. Select the correct profile name. A lot of times this should be defaulting to whatever your most commonly used profile is. So if that's student, student one, whatever it is for you, that should be defaulting to that. If it's not, feel free to let us know. We can actually help you kind of set that as a default so you don't have to choose it every time, which may especially be helpful if you do have, something like students helping with some stuff. Having it default to the correct thing automatically can reduce errors. I'm just gonna, normally you would use one of your regular library card numbers, but for the purposes of an account, I'm not really gonna save. I'm just gonna call it test ID. And then it's just a matter of entering the required information, which for schools really is first name, last name. You may or may not use group ID either for graduation year or homeroom. But for schools, we really strongly encourage you, we kind of basically require you to use Cat 6 for graduation year on the demographics tab. That way, if you do, transfer accounts like from the elementary school to the high school, we can use that graduation year to sort out the different classes. Or if you need to do like bulk deletions when they graduate, we'll need that graduation year in order to identify the graduating students. So please, 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 please enter user Cat 6 for graduation year. Otherwise, for schools, we don't require things like, address, date of birth. Although if you do have students who have email addresses through the schools, including those on their account can be helpful, especially for like high school students who really are maybe more actively managing their own accounts. That way they can receive billing notices or due date reminder notices, things like that, that the system sends out. So that's kind of as much as I'll get into user registration. But if you do have any questions, feel free to ask them. There is also a display user wizard where you can search for a user by their name, or you can enter a user ID and see their account, but you can also look them up by name. You may want to narrow down to your particular library in this case, because if they also have, a public library account, you don't want to be inadvertently looking at the wrong one to figure out, what the situation is with their school account. I'm going to pull up my own account. Oh, no, wrong thing. Just to show you kind of how to navigate around. Mostly what this is useful for is if you're trying to figure out whether a student, has fines, what the fines might be on, what the bills are. I know a lot of schools are fine free these days, but if they do have any bills, those would appear under their bill thing. If they had any holds, you could see the status of their holds there. Unfortunately, I don't have any of those on my account, but like there, you can actually see my old holds, and you can see the hold status. In these cases, these are things that have already been filled, so their status is unavailable, and you'll see, the place date, the pickup by date, things like that. Just sort of little bits of information that you can find out about what is going on with an account, which is sometimes helpful to know. You can also modify user. This, for most schools, a lot of you are using a default PIN rule, which, is something like the school mascot or something. But if for some reason you ever do need to change a user's PIN, either they've changed it themselves and then have forgotten what they changed it to, so you want to set it maybe back to the default, or you may have someone who thinks someone has gotten into their account, so they want to use something other than the default or something like that. While you can't see their PIN, you do have the ability to change it here in the modify user field. If you go into PIN and just type what you want the new PIN number to be. So let's say in my case, I want to go back to my default, which, let's say my school mascot. What was my high school mascot? We were the Falcons. So I'm going to change my PIN to Falcon. Again, as you type, it just fills in with asterisks. So you do want to be sure that you're typing what you think you're typing. So, go slow, be cautious. And then you will need to enter the RSA override there so that, it will accept it. Also, probably when you're setting up accounts, you probably want to, I forgot to mention this, but you probably also want to set the expiration date to be like June of their graduation year or something to that effect. If you ever do need to change that, you can also change that on the screen here. There's a little date calendar picker, so you can do that, or you can just type it in that format. That works as well. But if you make any changes to that, you do also need to put in that override, which is RSA. Anyway, if you make any changes, don't forget to save them if you want to save them, but I actually didn't want to save my PIN, change my PIN, so I won't save there. So I'll close out of that. Okay, no, do not save changes. Okay. The most common thing you need to do, obviously, is probably check out materials. So we have the checkout wizard. This will be saving the kind of whatever user and book you sort of last looked up. Those will pop up over here in current, which can be handy sometimes because sometimes you just are continuing to work with the same user or the same book. Other times you may need to enter a new user ID. Just, pay attention, make sure that is really who you want to check out to if you do click on that. Also, you probably do want to kind of make sure that this is the right book so that you haven't accidentally clicked on one that belongs to some other library and then, check it out to your user when it's actually sitting on a shelf somewhere. But otherwise, it's really just a matter of just, entering their user ID. That'll pull up their account information. If they have any special statuses, you'll see it up in this little summary up here. If they have anything major going on, like a book that's currently overdue or an available hold or something, or if their fines are, whatever, you'll get a pop-up window alerting you to that. But a lot of times you'll just see that up here. Sometimes the text will be red so that you're aware of it. And then you can just enter an item ID. I'll use this one for example purposes. And then it checks out. You'll see the date due, fill in there, and then, check out your whole stack of books to them. Just click check out to new user. You do have these email receipt options. So if you do have a student who has an email address on their account, or, teacher who wants to get email receipts instead of a paper receipt, or maybe you don't even have a receipt printer and you want to send them those records, you can use these email receipt button options. If they don't have an email address on their account, it'll actually give you a little pop-up window and tell you that they don't have one and give you an opportunity to put in an email address. So that's kind of nice. Just a couple of other things on this screen though, just to get back into my account. You do have some little helper options here, like if you notice something on their account that needs to be changed, there's like a modify user option. I very rarely use, any of these display user, modify user, register new user helpers, just because to me it's sort of easier just to, start from scratch and open up a whole separate wizard. But there's no reason not to use them. I just personally don't. But basically, any of these will open a pop-up window sort of over your current screen. So like if I open a user search, it opens that user search as a pop-up. And you can use that, if a student has mislaid their card or whatever. You also have, confirm address isn't going to be really relevant for schools because we don't require you to put that in anyway. But you do have like a pay bills button. So if they do have overdues or bills on their account, if they have any fines, that will become live right now. It's grayed out because I don't owe any money. There's also little things like this one, which is add brief title, which is used now for cataloging new stuff, but also for if you receive like an interlibrary loan from outside of RSA, that's used to create a temporary record for that item so you can check it out to your user. That's something I don't go in depth in about this training, but if that is something, I don't think a lot of our schools are doing outside of system ILLs, but if that ever does come up, feel free to reach out if you have questions. There's also an item search, which I do tend to caution people against using, although I use it a lot in trainings. But basically this is just sort of, it opens a search so you can look for materials. The reason I warn people about it is because you'll notice down here the button is not like a detailed display. The button is checkout item. So if you look up something like this, which sounds like something I would read, if I click on checkout item, this book is now like immediately charged to my account, even though it's sitting on the shelf at Lilliam Evans. So if you are checking out to a student and they go, oh, by the way, do you have this? I always encourage people to go ahead and finish all your checkouts and then open a separate item search and display wizard before, looking that up. Just because that temptation to multitask can get you into trouble. There may be times you may need to check out an item, that you've searched that you don't have physically in front of you. But just make sure that that's actually what you want to do, and always, make sure you're checking out the copy that you be checking out and things like that. So just exercise caution in using that. There's also this helper, which is change item ID. If you get a book that's got a really beat up barcode that doesn't scan well and you need to slap a new one on there, that's just a quick way to do that. If you open that, you can either look up a book or you can just type in the existing item ID and then enter the new barcode that you want to put on the book, and then it just updates that in the record. So the other thing, this used to get a lot of use, but less so now that so many libraries have gone find free. But this may be handy if you ever do find a time where like you've forgotten to get your close dates put in, or you need to adjust due dates because you need to get all the books back earlier than normal, or I don't know, maybe the class that's in the library now, there's an assembly on their next visit, so you want to extend the due dates till the next time they're actually coming in. Whatever that may be, if you do want the due dates to really reflect that, you can click on that and enter a specific date. Always leave it set to 11:59 p.m. And then a lot of times, if you're using this, you're probably going to be using it for like a whole class. So you might choose from now on, and then it'll just select that due date for as long as you have this checkout window open. Then when you no longer need that due date, you could just close out of it. And then when you open your checkout window before that little warning that you're using a special due date is gone and you're back to normal. So that may be something that may be helpful to you or may not be, depending on kind of, if you don't charge fines at all, then if the due date is incorrect by a couple of days, maybe it's not a big deal. But sometimes I know people like to use that just so that it kind of shows the right thing on the patron accounts, and so that the timing of like, reminder notices and things like that doesn't get messed up. So, but that's basically checking materials out. It's pretty straightforward, just enter the user ID and then scan the items. There are a few pop-up windows that you can get sometimes. Like sometimes you'll get a pop-up window that will say item has holds if, well, here, I'll make one happen. Let me place a hold. Place a hold on this. Okay. If I go to check out with one of my other accounts, if I go to check this book out, it'll tell me that another user has a hold on it, even though that's also me. The system doesn't know that. So if you do have an item pop up that has holds, odds are that's just something that was on your shelf and the hold was placed, after you did your pick list for the morning. And so you haven't had a chance to pull this book. Generally speaking, we don't require you to like yank the book out of your student's hands and say, I'm sorry, I have to send this across the state now. You can go ahead and check that out to your user. And so if you are doing that, you would just, type RSA and then override and check out item. And then that leaves the hold in place so that, that hold gets filled by another library for whoever wanted it in, Morton or wherever. But you can go ahead and check that out to your user. Yeah, that's basically that as far as schools go. There is that option to override, check out the item, and cancel the hold. I don't see that coming up as often in schools. That gets used a lot in public libraries where like a family member is maybe picking up a hold for a different member of their family. So it's still going to the original person. So you don't need to leave that hold in place. I guess that could happen if like you have a teacher whose student is whose child is also a student, so if that ever comes up that you don't want to leave the original hold in place. But generally speaking, if it's just a situation where they found the book on the shelf and, there just happens to be a hold elsewhere in the system, you don't want to cancel the hold. So just do that and then check out the book. There is also the one thing you may want to be cautious of is if that ever pops up and says item has available hold. What that would mean is that the book has somehow been scanned in and already marked as like ready for pickup and then somehow got back on the shelf by accident, or maybe you had a student come behind the desk and get something off of your available hold shelf. That would mean that it's in theory ready and waiting for someone else. So and sometimes you get those honest mistakes where someone just accidentally picks up someone else's book or something like that. Those you probably want to look at a little bit closer though before you decide to let that checkout go through. Discharging is pretty straightforward, again, especially now that more libraries are fine free anyway. Just discharge the book. In this case, it's telling me that this book is available to fill a hold, so I could then check that out to myself. But if I do check that out to myself, okay, this poor book is gonna get so many random statistics today. Okay. If I now return it again, it's going to tell me to transit it back to the owning library because now I've filled the hold. So if you do ever have something that had come in for a hold and has been checked out by your user and needs to go back home, this is the type of message you'll get: item now in transit. And then you just take your handy dandy transit label and you look up your brand new and updated membership list to get the member library code. That is another one of the big changes that happened over the course of the summer, is the delivery system has been revamped. So instead of writing the library name like before, you would have written normal public library on your membership slip. Now you would write, I don't know normal's code off the top of my head, but 125-EP or something like that. Before we leave, I will go into the new membership list and give you a brief rundown of how that works. So, but since I'm in workflows now, I'll keep going. And then you send that off. So, but if it is your item, it just will tell you, what shelving location to return it to. Fine free discharge and discharging book drop. Those are both ways of adjusting the fines basically as you discharge. Fine free discharge just removes any currently accruing fines. Discharging book drop allows you to backdate your return. So if you've had an unexpected closure or something, you could set your discharge date to like the day before the closure and do your returns. Again, this I think gets less use now that more libraries are fine free because they're not as worried about a couple of days worth of fines, and things that are in lost status come out of lost status when they're returned anyway. But again, they are there, so if you do need to use them, feel free. Renewing user, renewing item are both pretty straightforward. If you say renew user, it'll show everything that you currently have checked out. You have little buttons where you can choose to renew them or not. And then you just click renew selected items. If there are holds, it will warn you this item has holds, and there will be an option to override. That is one of the things in our policies, though, where we do ask that library staff not override to renew materials that are on hold. While we let you, check out that item to your patron, if there are holds on it, we kind of ask that you sort of limit them to sort of one turn per person until the whole line has gone, basically, is sort of, that sort of principle. So just be aware of that. There may be times you may have to, allow a little bit of leeway there if, if it's a situation where they think maybe they've lost the book and need to search. that may be a time you may need to exercise some leeway. But we do ask, generally speaking, that you, if it's your own book, you have a little bit more leeway, but especially if it's another library's item and they've either exhausted all their turns or, something strange is going on where there's like a hold queue, that you kind of ask permission to give an extra turn. But generally speaking, don't override to allow renewals on items with holds. There's also renew item as an option where you just scan the specific book that you want to renew and it just renews on whatever account it was on. There are also ways to create bills on user accounts, as we all know and probably don't particularly enjoy doing. Most bills are created just by the system because a user has just kept a book too long. The system is set to run a report called the assumed lost report. Some libraries have these set up as a custom time frame. Other libraries just use the RSA wide default, which is 30 days past the due date for books. But some libraries, especially fine-free libraries, have a shorter turnaround time between a book going, being overdue and then going into lost status. You don't have to do anything to make that happen, though. We have that set up automatically to run for your library. But there may be times where you either receive a book that's so damaged that you need to bill the user for the replacement cost of it, or a user comes in and says, I know I've lost this book. My mom sent me with 20 bucks to pay for it, and you need to just go ahead and create a bill so that they could pay it off. So if you ever do need to do that, you're going to want to go down to the items group and go to mark item lost. So even if it's a situation of damage as opposed to the book being lost, if the way I describe it is it's lost to your collection, whatever it is no longer usable. You're going to be deleting the item and purchasing a replacement. So in that situation, you would use mark item lost. You have a couple of ways. You can either use the item search helper to look up the item. If you know the item's ID, you can just type it in. Or you can look up the user and see what they have checked out on their account and create the bill that way. I'm going to do it that way just because I find that a little easier. So I'm going to bill myself for this return of the thief. We say mark lost, that fills in the item ID there, and then I just hit enter. And then this will pull up this little confirmation screen that'll tell me the lost item cost, which is the price of the item as it was cataloged. If this happened to be something that was cataloged without a price, then it would be the default price that either the default price for that item type that we've set up for your library or the system-wide default price. And then a processing fee. So if your library charges a processing fee, that would appear there. And then we just say bill user. Or if they're ready to pay right now, you could choose a payment type here and like say, for example, cash, and then say pay now. And then that applies the bill and marks it paid in one fell swoop. I'm going to create the bill on my account though. So there we go. So now I've got that bill on my account. And if I go into my display user, you'll see I get this pop-up window now that says I'm blocked and that I owe $18.99 in fines. And you can see it down there under my bills. Part of the reason I really encourage you to do it this way is one thing that's nice about this is if you look up the item, it has changed the item status to lost claim. And even if I go in and pay that bill, I'm going to, call it cancel since it's a fake bill anyway, but pay bills. If I go back into item search and display and look it up, that bill is now paid. If you go to this bills tab, there's nothing under it, but that status hasn't changed because the fact that I've paid for that book or, canceled that bill, the book hasn't magically rematerialized. In order to get it out of that lost claim status, I would need to discharge it. So if I discharge it, oops, we have a new person. If I discharge it, I do get this warning that this item was in lost status or assumed to be lost, and I get the item ID. So it's giving me that heads up that maybe I need to check and make sure that I've cleared all, other statuses from that user, but that takes it out of that lost status. And in this case, it puts it back in transit to the item owning library. So basically, I don't know, 90% of the time you've got a book in a weird status, the way to get it out of that status is to just discharge it. The only thing that doesn't really help with is sometimes in transit stuff, unless you are the destination library, then that doesn't really help. If you ever do get an item that's in a weird status and you can't figure out how to clear it, feel free to give us a call. So that's sort of bills, the very, very quick version. You do also have a specific paying bills wizard, or if you go to checkout and they have bills, you have that helper, or it'll pop up with a notice that they have bills and a prompt to pay them. So there's a lot of different ways to remove bills. Any questions about any of that? Okay, we'll go ahead and get into holds. So we'll start by talking about placing holds. The Placehold Wizard is pretty simple. It's kind of like the checkout wizard in the sense that all you need is your user ID and the item ID for the book you want to place on hold. Of course, since by definition, if you're placing a hold, you probably don't have the book in front of you, because why would you bother otherwise? You're probably going to need to search for an item. You can do this in the wizard. There's an item search helper right there, which if you click on opens a pop-up window and you can search for your whatever you want to place on hold. You may already know what it is because maybe you've already done some searching in the catalog or something, or you need to search for a title. Do the Hobbit again. You'll notice I did a keyword search, so I get anything with Hobbit kind of anywhere in the title. If I change that to browse, I'm going to get more things that are specifically titled Hobbit. And you'll notice that, like before that, we have hobbies for men, manly men doing manly things. Hobbies for girls, hobbies for boys, because it's important that those be completely separate. Anyway, there's all of these different things here. And you'll kind of notice that it is alphabetized though. This just drops you, doing a browse search like this basically just drops you into the whole title list, sort of wherever you are alphabetically. So you can kind of see all these, related titles and things like that. Your results down here, your headings are sortable. So one thing that I do kind of find useful to do sometimes is to click on the author tab, and then that sorts that alphabetically. So I can just kind of scroll down to J.R.R. Tolkien and see if I can find, just the book, The Hobbit. And one thing that is often kind of helpful to look at is the number of copies, because a lot of times the sort of real, unabridged original version is going to be also kind of the one that has the most copies. You can also peek at your description and stuff though, and make sure you don't have any notes about abridgment or things like that if that's not what you're looking for. You also have subject terms and things that are clickable, so you can find related things of that nature. But anyway, most of the time you don't really need to do that. You can just click place hold. It doesn't really, for the most part, matter which one you've got selected on this call number and item thing, because most of the time we encourage you to use a title level hold. A title level hold basically means that the system is going to be looking for any title on the same record as whichever one you've selected. So we just say place hold. It probably filled in that Alpha Park item ID, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the one I'm going to get because I've got title level hold selected, which again is most of the time what you're going to want to do. Your pickup at should be defaulting to your own library, but if for some reason you need to send it to another library, you could change that, although in your case you probably don't want to because your student school cards aren't going to be valid at the public library. So generally speaking, though, you're just going to want to leave it set to pick up at your school. Most of the time you don't need to change any of this, and you just click place hold. But now, in the interest of making it more complicated, I will show you all the things that you may occasionally want to change. So if we do the same book and change the level to copy, that means that the book with this item ID is the only one that can fill this hold and no other. So that may be something you may occasionally need to do for various reasons. A lot of times if you're doing that, it's you placing a hold on your own copy of something so that you don't get another library's. But most of the time, again, just leave it as title. That means anyone in the system on that record can send that to you. Expiration date, that's just when the system stops trying to find the hold for you if it can't find it immediately. Most of the time, that's not really relevant. Most of the time, holds get filled within, a couple of weeks. But basically, we just have to have a kind of a point at which the system stops trying, and it's set to be 300 days from the current date, just kind of somewhat arbitrarily. You can add comments to a hold. Most of the time for holds you're just placing for students or teachers, you probably don't need to add comments. But sometimes, like I mentioned with the copy level hold, you may need to place holds on your own materials for some specific reason. That might be times that comments are helpful. Suspension dates allows you to set a time in which a hold won't be filled. So if you're placing a hold for someone who's going to be like out of town for a bit, you might put in the suspension dates for when they'll be gone. That way the system will try to find the hold for them until the suspension starts. And then it'll just kind of ignore their hold until they return, basically. Probably not used quite as much in schools as this is used in public libraries, but it is there and is something you could use. Level, we talked about the level already, but range is kind of similar, but it tells it, rather than telling the system which one of the copies you want, it tells it where you maybe want it from. So if you choose library, then this would be, even if you leave it at title, it'll be only copies owned by your library. So you may have multiple copies of something, like maybe you got a grant to buy a classroom set of 1984 or something like that. So you could choose library and then only one of your copies of 1984 would fill the hold. Group would be either your library or any other libraries in your group. So like any of the Stark County libraries, if that's your library, or any of the IVC libraries, if you're at, Mossville or something. System would be anyone in the system that you share with. Again, I know some schools only share with other schools, some publics only share with other publics, but with those parameters, anyone in the system. We ask libraries not to use recall, so leave that set at as no recall. And I consider make hold first in queue an emergencies only situation, and I don't count the student who didn't start working on their project till the day before the deadline as an emergency, because what this does is it will literally skip everyone else in the list and put the hold at the top of the list. And so since all the other students on the list might have planned ahead better than the student who forgot about their deadline, I generally don't encourage using it for things like that. Times you might want to use this, though, might be times where like maybe you've had to place a hold on your own item to get it sent to you because it's missing a piece or it's damaged or something. So you need to get it to either repair it or to put the missing piece back in it or something before it goes out to other holds. That might be a make hold first in queue type of situation. So anyway, once you've done all that, though, just place hold. And there you go. And in this case, it's going to tell me that I already have a hold on this material. I can hit override and it'll allow me to place a duplicate hold. And then, I will ultimately get 2 copies of The Hobbit if I wanted them. That is one way to place multiple copies of the same thing on hold. As you can imagine, if you have a teacher who's trying to get a classroom set of something, doing that and with the override 20 times gets a little bit burdensome. So there is another way to place multiple copies of the same thing on hold, which I will briefly dive into now. That is the place research hold wizard down here. If you choose that, you just put in a user ID like normal, but this time you get this pop-up window, which is a little bit different. And you'll need to complete all the fields on this in order to proceed. So blanket ID stays as new. You say you need 10 copies, pickup location, and this one will require an expiration date because it's assuming that if you want, that you don't want 10 copies of something just for fun, that you have a specific event you need it for. So we'll say I need this by Halloween. You will want to choose copy as your level, and again, no recall, and then just say okay. And then you want to search for your book, the books that you want. So in this case, we'll do The Hobbit again and choose one, click add to list, and then it's going to kind of fill in and then go back up, bump to the next library in the thing, add to list, it puts in the item ID, we choose add to list. And so if you do need a whole bunch of copies of something, this is a lot faster than doing them as duplicate holds and having to do that override every time. It's still a little bit clunky, but like I said, still a little bit easier than the other option. So if you ever do need to do that, let's try. Hopefully I'll get at least a couple of errors here. Oh, good, stack sounds promising. Okay, so I didn't choose quite 10. Ideally, what I would actually probably do is choose 12 or 13 if I actually want to get 10. That way, if there are some problems or some that aren't available, I'm not, I've chosen slightly more than I need. One of the nice things about this wizard is that as stuff starts arriving, as soon as it gets 10 available at the destination, it'll automatically cancel the rest, so you don't have to remember to go in and do that. So I always recommend doing a few to grow on. And then you just say place blanket hold. It's going to tell me about my duplicates. It's going to tell me about my duplicates for every single time. That's annoying. Normally, you wouldn't have a duplicate hold. Normally, you would just start this way. Okay, well, I didn't have any errors, unfortunately, though. Sometimes you'll get a hold cannot be placed, and the RSA override actually won't work for that because you still wouldn't get the item, so there's not much point in overriding it. But anyway, it will give you a little confirmation that you selected 7 items and it placed 7 holds. If there were errors, it might say you selected 7 items and placed 6 holds. Anyway, so that's just kind of a fun little extra wizard. So that's placing holds for your students. As far as these holds coming in, they will just come to you in your blue bins, and just like everything else in your blue bins, just take everything from your blue bin, discharge it all, and if it has a hold, it'll alert you. It'll say item has available hold or route to holds, and then you can, get the user information and do whatever you do to alert them or set it aside for when their class comes in next, however you manage that, and then just check it out to them when they are ready to take the book. But then as far as sending materials out to fill holds from other places, there are a couple of ways that this happens. Every library has a Gmail account, which RSA has created for you. We ask that you check this daily, basically. A lot of libraries have it set up to forward to another email account. That's fine. Just don't lose track of your logins to the original Gmail account. Also, one thing about the Gmail accounts that is kind of important is these are technically our accounts. So we kind of ask libraries to keep RSA set as the the recovery email address and phone number. The recovery phone number should be set to the RSA after hours phone number, and the recovery email should be set to the RSA help desk. This way, if there is staffing changes, if you leave and the new librarian comes in and they can't find where you left the Gmail login info, this way we can help them get in, basically, is why we ask to be kind of your backups on that. Also, we've had things where libraries set the recovery phone number to be a landline at the library, and then you can't get text verification codes and things like that. So we ask that those be left as RSA information, and also that if you need to change the password, that you don't change the passover without letting us know, because we keep a spreadsheet of all those passwords so that we can pass them along to new staff if you should happen to leave. So if you do need to change the password, let us know so that we can update our records, basically. But in that RSA Gmail account, you receive a pick list. You receive this 3 times a day at 5 a.m., noon, and 4 p.m. We only ask you to pull it once a day, basically. So if you come in the morning, just grab that one from 5 a.m., pull the items on it, and then ignore the rest of them. If you happen to have a day where it's like a half day and you're only there in the afternoon, don't bother with the morning one. Just pull whatever one is most recent. And basically what that pick list is it's just a list of the books that are theoretically on your shelf that have been requested by people at other libraries. So you just take that list, go to your shelf, find all those books, bring them back to your desk, and then go to the Placehold Wizard and just scan them all. So that is one way to do your pick list. The way we actually recommend, though, is actually to go to this on-shelf items wizard. We still ask you to check your Gmail daily, but for getting the pick list, we actually, now that they've added this on-shelf items wizard, we actually kind of recommend that over the pick list, partially because items that have already been either checked out or, trapped or whatever, they come off this list. So it doesn't update completely live. It still only updates when the reports run at 5 a.m., noon, and 4 p.m. We actually have a couple of additional ones that feed this wizard at 10 and 2. So it updates slightly more frequently, and it pulls items that have already been pulled off of it. Unfortunately, since I'm not really at a real library, I'll have to pull up another library's pick list to show you what it looks like. We'll do my old library and do the North Branch. The other thing I like about this is that, I mean, I just personally like the grid view better than I like the kind of, it's kind of the one you get in your emails, just kind of long and a little bit unappealingly formatted, in my opinion. It's kind of a little harder to read. The other thing that I really like about this, though, is you can actually, if you click in the top line and then just shift a down arrow, you can select the whole thing and just Control C, and then you can open an Excel document and just drop it into a spreadsheet. And then you can like kind of sort, you can delete the columns you don't need, all that kind of stuff. And then you get a nice little printable chart that you can bring around to your shelves, which I find easier to manage personally. If you are doing that, I highly recommend deleting the user ID and username columns. That way you don't have personally identifiable information on the pick list. And so you don't have to worry about like shredding it when you're done. Anytime we have a document that includes like user IDs and usernames, we ask that you dispose of that responsibly, because we don't want those user IDs just floating around out there in the system. Because if a library has self-checks, then someone could just walk into that library with a user ID and check out books to it. So don't keep those secure. Probably less of a risk in a school, but still all the same, good practice. And then again, just pull all those items off your shelf, go to trap holds, just scan them all through. If there ever are ones that you can't find, there is this mark item missing. So you can mark that item is missing, and then that way it'll stop showing up on your pick list. The fact that you can't find it is reflected in the catalog. That's something you do kind of want to keep a little bit of an eye on. You can see, we can help you generate lists of your items that are in missing status so that you can kind of, check for them occasionally, see if they've turned up, or if they've been in missing status for 5 years, you can kind of go, okay, that's probably really gone. It's time for me to discard that. Things of that nature, just some ways to help you manage your collection. Any questions about holds? Okay, I'm going to go into item search and display and just do a little bit about some search strategy stuff. And then I will spend some time with our support site and RSA Cat, just as an overview. So the item search and display wizard, depending on how you're set up, you may open up to this view, which is the advanced search, or you may open up to this view, which is the, I don't know, less advanced search, or the original classic search. To toggle between the two, it's just this little helper that is binoculars with a little yellow plus sign, and that just bounces back and forth. The big difference is that in advanced search, you can search by multiple fields at the same time. So you could choose like, on, I don't know, philosophy. And let's see if that gets us his nonfiction stuff. Yeah, that gets us basically Umberto Eco's nonfiction philosophical writings as opposed to his fictional writings. So that can help you narrow it down if you need to. Or in title search, in the classic search, you do have a list of different indices you can search by. One of the things I like about the classic search is that you can choose your search type. So, if we do an author search and we do a browse, kind of like, oh, that's title. There we go. Kind of like you saw when I was searching earlier, that doing it this way, this just brings you into the big author thesaurus. I don't know if that's quite the right word when we were talking about the author list, though. And you can see all of the different author headings. One of these is the actual correct authorized form, and that's probably, hopefully, this one with the most occurrences. And then down below, you can see all the records associated with that. Although, interestingly, you will see some things where, the author is not Umberto Eco. But if we go into the description, I bet we can find out that there is an introduction by Umberto Eco. So that's why this is popping up. Also, let me show you just in a title search. If I do a title search for this, sorry, I did the wrong thing to show you what I meant to show you, but same thing where it drops you into the thesaurus. If I do a keyword search for this title, I actually end up with this weird problem. I get this error because and is one of your Boolean operators, and keyword search is going to try to use that to formulate the search. So basically, and, not, and or are your Boolean operators. So including them in the search, the system's going to try to treat it as a command. So like in a keyword search, I could search for, I'm trying to think of a good example, but I could search for fish and bicycles, and it would find me things that include both of those things in the title. But if I start with an operator, then it can't perform the search because it doesn't know what I want to compare. So to get around this, I could still do a keyword search and put it in quotes, and then it searches for that as a phrase. So the reason I wanted to show you this is because if I get all these titles that have nothing, that seemingly have nothing to do with it, but if I look at the description, this is a collection of short stories. So odds are good that somewhere in here, usually I can figure out why we get, oh, the first story in this book is called And the Band Played On. So it's looking at the title headings of the individual chapters and things like that. You'll also see like folk songs. So if there is a title list within the work, then it'll search for that, which sometimes is frustrating. But if you're looking for a poem in an anthology or a play in an anthology or something like that, then being able to do that sort of search is really helpful. And then you saw what happened if I did a browse, it just gives me things with that specific title. For another good Boolean example, I use God's Not Dead a lot because it's got that not right in the middle. So if I do a search for that, I've basically told the system that I want to find everything except for the thing I actually want to find, because that's going to basically exclude what I'm actually looking for. But again, put it in quotes or switch your search type to browse. So anytime you're getting kind of search results that just feel like they don't really make sense for what you expect to find, try one of those strategies. Try doing a phrase keyword search or a browse search. Any questions about searching? Any things that you've tried to search for and had a lot of trouble finding? Any examples or tips that you've run across that you would like to share? I don't see anything in the chat, and I don't see anyone rushing to unmute themselves. So I will turn off my screen share briefly, and just to switch to a new window here. Okay. Okay, so in our RSA support site, I'm just going to show you briefly. I mentioned our new membership list, which is here under RSA membership. There's a link to download it, but you'll notice that it looks a little bit different than it used to. And you'll see that we've added this column that is library delivery code. So like I was talking about with that book that we'd want to send to normal, instead of writing normal PL like we used to, you would actually type 108-EP. You will notice that some of these delivery codes don't have a code, they have a red arrow. So if you are trying to send it to a library and you look up that library's code in your delivery list and you see a red arrow, that means that what you should write on your delivery label is what is here in this red text. That red arrow is directing you to that, so type that. So you would type, in this case, like the elementary school doesn't receive delivery directly. Their stuff is going to the high school. So you'll want to label it 2003-EP, which is the high school's code, but you'll want to put a 4 note that is for, Alwood 225 ES for elementary school. And that way, when they receive that at the high school, they know that gets routed to the elementary school. So anytime you have that red arrow, just look to the right of it and follow those instructions. You will sometimes see this one that is other notes. Let me find a good one. Okay, like Spoon River. This one has a note that you need to use the ILDS label, which is, you may recognize as this one, where you would circle their SRC code and label it at the top. There's also Share Illinois. I don't know how much that'll come up at a school library, but you'll see a note that says use ILDS label, and then write destination library name, look up names in L2, circle correct the destination code below. And again, that is referring to this code. So if you ever do have that sort of thing, there are some where there's no code at all, like St. Mark's. They are a library that receives delivery via mail as opposed to having a regular delivery stop. So that needs to come to East Peoria with a note that it goes to St. Mark's School. And then when it arrives here, they set that aside to be mailed to them. So basically, though, just always look for either the code or the red arrow in the instructions, and just whatever is there, do that. So if you have an old one of these that doesn't include this delivery code column, please come to our website, click there to download it. There is also a little cheat sheet, so if you need to print that off to share with your staff for explanations of how to use it, there is also that. So that is that. I'm going to go briefly to the catalog. Kendall went into it a little bit in his session, but just to kind of show you some stuff. So RSA CAT information on our website. If you're not sure where to find a link to your own RSA CAT page, just go to that new RSA CAT links. We've got all the school libraries over here. Find your school. If you have, libraries, and if you have computers in the library for students to search on, then you'll probably want to bookmark this page so that they could go straight to the catalog to do some searching. I'll do AC Central. And basically, you have kind of similar search options as you have in workflows here. So your students can do their own searching. You can do searching by various fields. You can also just kind of type something in that all fields and kind of treat it more almost like a Google search. There's also advanced search, where you can do, all these words or this exact phrase, don't show these specific things. You could do like a title, but excluding a certain author, things like that. And you can sort of set your search targets. I'm going to do the Hobbit again. And we'll do my advanced search. And once you've done your search, you also have options to limit your search results. So say we only want to find book, we could do book and include that. Or maybe I only want to see things with a certain publication date, or only things of a certain reading level. This added when is new, so you could see only things that are added within the, X number of days, or over 180 days ago. You can choose your subjects, all of that, fiction or nonfiction. You can choose your library, all sorts of different things that you can kind of narrow your search down by. There are, especially for very popular books, a lot of times you do have some added data of like, reader reviews and tags and recommendations, things you may also like. If you wanted to place holds on something, you just click place hold, and then it will ask you for your card number and your PIN. This is part of why, those student PINs are important. If they have an email address on their account, then they could use that forgot my PIN option to reset a PIN. You would need to put in the card number, and then it would email them a recovery link, but only if they have an email address on file. So, oh goodness, I don't know if I've. Okay, good. I don't have a default pickup library selected, so I would have to choose pickup library. This will probably kick it out because I'm probably not allowed to place holds at your library. Oh no, it let me do it. Huh, surprising. If I were a public library. Well, no, I am. I don't know why it let me. I'm a little surprised it let me do that. It probably wouldn't let me check it out though. If I go into my account, I can also kind of review my account status. This is also where I could conceivably change my PIN if I needed to. My checkouts, you can see that book that I checked out earlier. You can see those holds that I placed earlier. I do have the option to select all and cancel my holds here, or like edit my holds. I can add a suspension, all of that sort of stuff. I'm just going to cancel them now. If I had fines, I would be able to view those there as well. So there's a fair amount that users can do from the catalog. So especially if your students are kind of old enough to want to manage their accounts themselves, that can be a helpful tool for them. I will log out though. Any questions? Anything else you would like me to cover while you've got me here? I could go into notice reports and things like that if you wanted me to, or I can let you go a half hour early. I will leave it up to y'all. I'll turn off my screen share while you consider. Okay. How do you return holds to schools? What do you mean by return holds to schools? Like just like when you discharge it and it belongs to someone else, just to transit it back? Okay. Yeah, you just when you discharge it, let me share my screen again. Okay. If you discharge a book that doesn't belong to you, you'll get this message that says the item is now in transit, and it'll tell you where to transit to. You just click OK, and then you grab your transit labels, which I'm holding up to the screen on my camera view, and you would. Sorry, going back to my RSA cat, not my RSA cat, my membership list. That one had me transit it to Lilliam Evans. So I looked down on my membership list to find Lilliam Evans' code, which is 086-EP. So I write that. Just like that on my label and send it off to them. Throw it in my blue bin for pickup. Did that answer the question? Yep. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. And sorry, if anyone is confused, I am responding to questions that are coming in via chat. So we have another one incoming. Okay. When you get the books that you place on hold, do you need to do anything when we get them? Everything that comes in your blue bins just needs to be discharged. Just open your discharge wizard, scan everything in the blue bin. If it has a hold, it'll pop up with a notice telling you who that hold is for. So you may need to alert that student that they have a hold ready, or you may just set it aside for the next time they come into your, to the library. I don't know how y'all individually handle that. That's something that's up to you. And then when they come in, you do need to check it out to them. I do have, sometimes there's a bit of confusion about that. When they are ready to check out the book, you need to actually check it out to them, and then that fills the hold in the system. One of the things you do get in your pick list regularly that I forgot to mention is a clean hold shelf list. That is a list of anything that has been sent to you but has not been checked out in the required amount of time. Typically it's 7 days, sometimes it's 10 days before that hold expires and needs to be sent back. So like if you got a hold in for a student and they were out sick for a week, then their hold might show up on the clean hold shelf list because it had never been checked out to them. Or if you forgot to check it out to them, it might show up on your clean hold shelf list. So that's a good way to catch errors as well. If you're kind of like, oh, I know I checked that out to that kid, you might have missed the actual checking it out part. That part is important because that tells the system that it has been received and is now with the student. And then when they're done with it, just discharge it, and it'll tell you to route it back to the library that owns it. Did I get it? All right. Okay. Any other questions about any part? And again, there are no silly questions. If you don't know it, don't be shy. We know, especially at schools, that a lot of times there is new staff and turnover. If you do have, I recognize most of your names, but if you do happen to be a new staff member, let us know. We would love to set up a call with you where we could really sit down and kind of go over things in detail. So let us know. You can send an email to the help desk if you don't want to announce yourself. Yeah, let me turn my share screen back on. Share my workflows again. Let me check something out real quick. I'll check this one back out to myself, this poor book. This one, I'm getting this transited item override because this is that one that I just discharged and put in transit. So if I try to check it out again, it's like, wait, this is in transit. What are you doing? I just say release item. Down here, I could just choose, check out to new user and end this checkout, but I could also do this email current checkouts receipt. And that just, since I already have the email address on my account, it just sends me a receipt that says I have this item currently checked out. That's basically all there is to it. If I do all checkout receipts, then that's going to be this item and anything that I have checked out already. So that's the difference between current checkouts and all checkouts. Yeah. Sorry, but if I do checkout to user, then that just clears me out and sends it to. The system also has the ability to send out due date reminders and bill notices and overdue notices. We can set those up for you if you don't already have them set up, or if you're not sure if you have them set up, let us know. And we can check your settings and get those set up for you if that is something that you think it would be helpful. For some school libraries, even if their students don't really have emails and aren't really checking them, sometimes they like to have the notices set up because then that gives you a notice that you can easily print out and give to the student if they do have overdues or bills. So that may be something to consider. That's something I would say, like, our default schedule is to send a courtesy notice 3 days before the items are due, to send overdue notices depending on whether you're fine free or not. But schedule fluctuates a little bit. But like if you're fine free, we would suggest sending overdue notices at 2 days past the due date, 5 days past the due date, and then a last one at 10 days past the due date, and then to have the items go into lost status at 14 days past the due date, which creates a bill, which then could also be sent out. And that basically just says sort of like, hi, did you know you still haven't returned this book? We've billed you for the complete cost of it. Please, see so-and-so at the library for more details. That sort of thing. Just kind of basically says like, hey, you need to talk to us. But even if you're not keen on emailing things to your students, I would say having at least the bill notice set up so that you could print them out. One thing that is also nice about those is it's a little prompt for you as the librarian to like, okay, double check your shelves and make sure that the book hasn't wandered back already, and just been missed, something like that. But then also, if you do need to print it out and give it to them to like bring to their parents to get paid for the missing book, then that's kind of helpful for a lot of libraries. So if you're not sure where you stand with those, let us know, and we can go over how you're set up or get you set up if you don't have them set up at all. I'll just briefly, actually, I probably want to log in as some random library to show you that, because I don't really have any set up. So let me Let me find a school library that's got some notices. 1 second. Okay, Allwood has bill notices, so let me log in as them. Sorry for the typing. Okay, let me get into this and then I'll share my screen again. Okay. So I'm logged in as Allwood Elementary School because they have some circulation reports. Reports can only be accessed by the circulation account at your library. So if you regularly, like if you have an individual cataloger login, and that's how you usually log in, you wouldn't see these. You have to log in as your library's generic circ account because that's the owner of all of these reports, because only one account can own them. But if you go into reports, you would see, we would have you go to finish reports. You can uncheck that, but I won't do that for them since this isn't my account, and just say, okay. And you'll see a list of bill notices. These are the ones that have run every day for the last however long. Hopefully they don't have too many bill notices at this point in the school year. But to open one, you would just say, okay, double click on it. This will have view log, view result, format report. Normally you would want to turn off view log since that's a bunch of system junk that you don't really need to see. But I'm going to leave it on just since otherwise it won't even open if there's no bills in it. Let's see. Yeah, they don't have any bills yet. Zero user records, 0 bill items printed. Let me go to something from like the end of the year last year. And oh no, it only goes back. Okay, yeah, unfortunately, since it's the start of the school year and these only go back 35 days. So I probably won't be able to find you a good example of the bill, at least not in a school, but it looks like this school kind of does what I would maybe suggest for a lot of you is just kind of just worry about the bill notices, and then that way you have something that you can print out and give to students. But basically, a sample bill notice is going to say something, along the lines of these items have, are overdue and have not been returned. Please, check your home for them and return them, and then the fines will be forgiven. Something along those lines. Sorry, I wish I had an example for you, but it's probably good that no one has been billed yet. But yeah, email the help desk if you want more data about how you're individually set up on that, because that's something that can be pretty individual. So I won't go into it in a training. But any other questions? Okay. Well, I will let you all go. You get 16 minutes of your life back that you didn't expect to have. So add that onto your lunch break and have a relaxed time or whatever you have to do. And then hopefully I'll see some of you again this afternoon for reports and cataloging. I might be lurking in those sessions, or I might be working on something else. But don't hesitate to reach out to us. Give us a call, email the help desk. We are here to back you up. If you are new, reach out. We can do sessions with you. If you just need, time to run something by us, feel free. We're here for you. Thank you for joining me though, and have a great school year, everybody. Okay, I will go ahead and end the meeting, and I will be posting this one to our YouTube channel and probably in a couple of days, early next week. So if you do have staff who wasn't able to attend, feel free to point them that way. We do also have a little playlist of trainings for school libraries that are kind of tailored to school library specific things. So if you do need other refreshers or want to point other staff toward those, we have that as well. So have a great day. Bye-bye.